Well, that was awesome. Wow. Look at this turnout. I was trying to tell John, look at all these people that canceled their 4th of July weekend plans just to hear me speak, and then he brought it back home and said, no, actually we consolidated 2 services into, we consolidated one of our services. So that was short-lived. But I do want to share a little bit about Spy Camp, just to give you some of the numbers. There was 188 kids that went, and of those, 32 surrendered their life to Jesus for the very first time, which is awesome, yeah. 40 decided they made the decision they want to get baptized, and we usually try to do that from all our camps at the river baptism in August. So, dear Jesus, please make that river flow down so we can baptize people at the beginning of August, right? So that's the prayer. So keep praying for that. Otherwise, it's going to be like, I now baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Okay, bye. Hope you find your dad. Yeah, we don't want that. But we do want to do baptisms. And I do want to just highlight a few people and just say thank you to the 22 leaders from Rock Harbor that were there. That were really, these are adults and students who are full-time at life. And so to take, a few days away and take that time sacrifice and pour in and love and lead our kids is a huge thing. And those are the people that I would say are the heroes of this whole thing. And I also want to thank Christine Anderson, our kids director, and Katie Eastman, our elementary coordinator. This is the first year ever that we built from scratch the whole camp curriculum, all the videos, everything that happened was all made by them and their team, and it was awesome. And usually we've always bought a pre-made church camp curriculum, and so this first year of that, and it takes so much work to set up the stage for God to come in and do all this work in these kids' lives. So we want to just say thank you to those guys. But speaking of kids, you can clap. Yeah, there we go. If you could just do that after everything I say, that'll make me feel a lot better. So just keep that coming. But speaking, oh yeah, wow, okay. This is going to be good. But speaking of kids, last time I was up here, I shared with you, this was in January. A week later, we had a baby, and we had our baby Cohen Daniel. You guys are going to be here till like 1 if we do this. It's going to be good. But yeah, he was added to our family. We have 4 kids now. He's been a huge blessing. And we're officially that family now that when people, think about inviting us over, they're like, okay, that's a 6-pack of chicken breasts from Fred Meyer. Or we have to go to Costco if we invite the Morses. It's just going to be way too expensive, so forget it. But here's a picture of my family so you can see them. Yeah, we are pretty much perfect. We never argue. Perfect marriage, perfect kids. That picture says it all. So... but what's funny is I want to share with you the progression of kids. So when you have 4 kids, the first one, everybody's like, oh, congratulations, so adorable, it's awesome. And then the second one, we had twins, and it was boy-girl twins, and people would come up and say, oh, boy-girl twins, are they identical? You want me to show you? I mean, it's like, come on, people. Come on, I promise you, we got that. That happened, and it was real, and it's like, come on. Okay, pink and blue. But then we had our 4th, and then people really start to change how they look at you. It's kind of like, okay, do you know what causes this? Do you guys know what causes this? And the truth is, we're just really, really in love, and my wife can't keep her hands off me. So that's kind of how it goes, and I'm going to get in trouble for that because she's in here. So, but we're in our 4-week mini-series called inCourage. What does it look like to live in the courage to encourage other people? And if you're a type A person, you've noticed maybe that we didn't finish Joshua. Did anybody notice we have 2 chapters left of Joshua? Anybody? Okay, we've got 1 person that cares about our sermon series. This is great. But we didn't finish it. Keith's going to close us out in those last 2 chapters of Joshua in a couple weeks when he gets back. But next week, first, we're going to hear from Bren Angelos, the pastor of Rev 22 from downtown Boise. Awesome, incredible guy. Love him and really looking excited for him to close us out of our encouragement series. But today, I want to go a little bit deeper in this idea of encouragement, kind of diving into the question of what does it look like to be an encouragement to those around us as an action, a verb. What does that look like to encourage others? And as we do that, we're going to look at a man in the Bible, and I want to walk through some of the book of Acts with you as we look at this man who had the courage to encourage others by the way he acted. We'll look at his story, and I hope that we'll perhaps consider looking at what this idea of encouragement is and kind of look at it in a whole different way than what we're used to. What does it look like to be an encouragement to those around us? Before we start, I want to take a little poll. So by the raise of your hands, I'm going to ask you a question. You might raise your hand multiple times, but who here has influence on someone? Maybe you have a job that allows you to encourage people. You work in healthcare, you're a coach or a teacher. A lot of us. That's awesome. Who is a dad? Any dads in the house? Lots of dads. I'm a dad. Okay. And who's a mom? Okay. Who has a friend? Who has a friend? You're a friend to someone. Okay, so a lot of you raised your hands a ton of times. If you didn't raise your hand for that last one, I just gotta tell you, it's not them, it's you, okay? We gotta work past some of those things. We gotta work past it. But what does it look like to be an encouragement to those around us? You can see we all have some area of influence, some area of where we can encourage someone around us. So we need to be having this conversation. When we think of words like encouragement, we hear that word all the time. It's said all around us. It's said at church all the time. It's said probably in a lot of your workplaces. We hear it all the time. And we look at it through the lens of kind of how our culture defines it, which is, we think of encouragement as praise, words of affirmation, complimenting people. The Webster Dictionary says give, support, confidence, or hope to someone. But when you look at it and how it's used and how it's defined in the Bible, there's a lot more versatility to its meaning. There's a lot more of a well-rounded use. And I want us to look at that this morning. Who loves Greek? Does anybody just like getting in the Greek? Cool, we have 2 people. We're a really deep church. This is awesome. Okay, this is your first lesson on Greek, okay? The word is, and I'm going to say it in my best Greek, parakaleo. Okay, parakaleo. Everybody say that with me on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Parakaleo. You guys have no idea what you just said to me. You have no clue. You just said, Brandon, you're our favorite preacher. It's recorded. You can't go back. But parakaleo means to call to one side, to call for, to summon, to address, to speak to call upon, to comfort, to instruct, to teach, to admonish. It's not all flowers. It's the admonish side of it, to warn or reprimand. Exhort, to beg, to beseech. I beseech you not to fall asleep while I'm preaching back there. Thank you. To console, to comfort, to strengthen. But do you notice the difference in all of those? Those are all similar, not the difference. The similarities between all of those. They're all an action. They're all verbs, doing something. We're going to look at the story in Acts chapter 4, verse 32, if you want to flip there, but I want to set up the scene for you first as we begin to look at one of the greatest encouragers in the Bible. But I'm going to set up the scene. So the early church is growing at a rapid pace. Men, women, children by the thousands are coming to admit and to realize that Jesus Christ was the Messiah. Peter and John have just been thrown in prison for teaching that Jesus was risen from the dead. And upon their release, the church gathers. They gather together to pray that they would remain steadfast as they continue on against the persecution that they're receiving. They begin to rally around each other. We're going to be introduced to a guy named Joseph. I want you to look for this guy named Joseph. And this isn't Joseph, the dad of Jesus. This is a Joseph who's not a major character in the Bible. He shows up in Acts. And he's just kind of there. He's just a normal guy. So let's take a look. Acts 4:32 through 37. It says, now the full number of those who believed were of one heart and one soul. And no one said that any of the things that belonged to them was his own, but they had everything in common. And with the great power, the apostles were giving their testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great grace was upon them all. There was not a needy person among them, for as many as were owners of lands and houses sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold. And they laid it at the feet of the apostles. And it was distributed to each as any had need. Thus enter Joseph into the scene, who was also called by the apostles Barnabas, which means son of encouragement, a Levite, a native of Cyprus, sold a field that belonged to him and brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet. Now, as I was reading this, I was thinking, did I miss something here? Did I miss something? Because he's got this name, son of encouragement, but he didn't actually say anything. We're so used to encouragement being words. We're so used to somebody saying something that would be encouraging to us. But all he did here was do something. He sold his land, and he brought the money, and it encouraged those around him. So much so that they even decided to give him a different name. You're not going to be Joseph. You're going to be called the son of encouragement, not by what he said, but by what he did, which leads to the first answer to our question of what does it look like to be an encouragement to those around us. Number one is that encouragers are givers. They give of their time, their talent, and their treasure. And in this case, for Barnabas, it was his treasure. He sold that field that he owned, and it was encouragement to those around him. When we give of our treasure, it has a significant impact. Why is that? Because we all know what we hold on to the most tightly to. It's the things that we have. It's the money. It's the treasure. It's all the stuff that we have. We hold on to it more tightly. And so when we see somebody make a sacrifice with money or gifts or anything like that, it's a big deal because we know that's what we hold more tightly to. So I'm sure that we can all think of a time when we were encouraged by someone's generosity. I had the chance last week to be encouraged by an incredible story of encouragement as I was preparing my message. I was sitting at my desk. Well, okay, let me be honest. It was Keith's desk because I've kind of taken over his office since he left. So when he gets back, and it's going to be a little awkward when I say, did the elders not talk to you? Or this is weird. But I was sitting there, and I was preparing for this, and I get a text. And it's from a person, and they say, hey, we got wind through the grapevine that there's this little girl that's not going to be able to go to kids camp because her parents just can't do it this month. They thought they would be able to. They were trying, and up until the last minute, they just can't do it. So I want to pay this little girl's way in full, but I want to be anonymous. I don't want them to know that I did it. So would you please be willing to send that text and get a hold of them? Absolutely. I love being the bearer of good news. So I did that. I was all over it. So I sent a text, and I get this reply from her mom. She says, I'm trying not to cry right now while in the store. We broke her heart. And I want to pause for just a second. Her heart was broken when they told her they couldn't take her because they've been talking about in the kids' classroom over there for the last several weeks, for weeks on end, camp. It's going to be awesome. They've been showing videos. The momentum's been building. The excitement's been building. Her friends are all going. So she gets down to this week, and she can't go. Her mom said, we broke her heart when we told her. And get this, we couldn't do it this year after spending money to help a family member after another family member passed away. Encouragers are givers. She even sent me a picture after she told her, and this little girl's face was lit up. She has a beautiful smile, ear to ear, and she's so excited. She replied back, and she said, I just told my daughter that she'll be able to go, and she lost her mind when I told her, and she started crying. I also texted her dad because, in this day, when we text someone, if they don't respond within a minute, you go to the next person, right? So I texted her dad, and his text back was really funny because it rhymed. He said, my ego is not my amigo right now. I'm having a hard time accepting this gift because I feel like it's my responsibility to pay her way. And ladies, that's a little thing that us guys have called pride. I don't know if the guy next to you, if you need to give him a nudge, but that's what that is. It takes generosity to give, but it takes humility to be able to receive. So I replied with a bunch of compassion. I said, swallow the pride, you sucker, and allow yourselves to be blessed and provided for. It's because of your generosity, attitude, and awesomeness that someone would even be willing to bless you in this way. Plus, think of the incredible conversation you get to have tonight with your daughter about how God always provides. He replied back and said, I never thought of it that way. Thank you. And all of this started with someone who had the courage to encourage by giving. Someone who could have, when they got that information, they could have said, I'm going to pray that God provides a way for that. And it takes us back to our message that Scott Harrop shared several weeks ago about prayer, and it was the most taboo thing you've ever heard because he said, sometimes you don't need to pray. Sometimes we don't need to pray. We need to take action. We need to do something. And because this person was willing to encourage by giving, it led to me being encouraged just by being part of it and just being able to witness this whole thing unfold. And it led to a dad who had to work through his own pride and humility that it takes to be able to receive. And it led to a little girl who had an unbelievable camp experience. I talked to Christine Anderson and Katie Eastman last week after camp, and I said, how did it go for this little girl? And they said, we can't imagine camp without her. We couldn't imagine it. She was in her cabin. She was an encouragement. She was an includer. She brought other girls along, and she comes into a room, and she just lights it up. And just like Barnabas, this someone saw a need and was willing to make the sacrifice. I even talked to her dad this last week as well. He said she came home and she talked a mile a minute trying to share literally everything that they did through the last few days, and he said he could barely keep up. Encouragers or givers? We don't hear from Barnabas again until chapter 9. There's a man named Saul who's persecuting the church, and you pick it up there in Acts 9, 1 through 2, and it says, but Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest, and they asked him for the letters to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found anybody belonging to the way, anybody professing the name of Jesus, men or women, he might bring them bound as prisoners to Jerusalem. But it was on this Damascus road that Saul had this big encounter with Jesus that we all have heard of. He had this encounter, and he goes from being someone who persecutes Christians to being persecuted himself. But the disciples at this point, they're still scared of Saul. Why wouldn't they be? He had just murdered their friend Stephen. He's thrown countless of their friends in prison. So they didn't know, is this real? Is this a real faith? We can't fully trust in this. So they need to send somebody to check out if Saul is legit. And who do they send? Barnabas. Barnabas goes to find out if Paul is legit. Saul. Dang it, I gave it away. I gave it all away. It's Saul. But he goes and he takes a huge risk because he sees something in Saul that nobody else sees, which leads us to number 2 of what does it look like to be an encouragement to those around us. Encouragers see potential and value in others. See, when we see this potential and we value in others and we're willing to call it out, it can change everything for people. That's the whole reason I'm standing up here. That changed everything for me. My wife and I started going to Rock Harbor when I was about 8 months old. And we were getting really involved, and we were serving in different ministries. Right out of college, I owned my own business, and I had done that for 7 years. It was a little retail store. It was going great. We opened up another location. We were making great money, but there was a discontentment that was really growing inside of me of just questioning, God, what do you have for me? What's next for me? And it was about that time that Doug Conley wanted to go mountain biking. So if you don't know Doug Conley, he was one of the founding pastors here at Rock Harbor, and we sent him last September to go and plant Stonehill Church. Unbelievable guy. We love him a ton. And I'm in the car with him on the ride home from mountain biking, and he asked me a question. And if you know Doug, that's not unlike him. He's very intentional, always asks good questions to get conversation going. And he asked me an extremely intentional question. He said, Brandon, have you ever considered going into full-time ministry? That's when you're like, you know, don't ask questions like that while I'm driving. But I couldn't even come up with an answer. How do you answer a question like that when you've sat right over here about 3 rows in front of the sound booth? That was our normal little seat. We'd sit there every week watching Keith speak every single week, and I would picture myself up here wondering, could I do that? I wonder if that could ever be me. And the more I put myself in Keith's shoes, the more my stomach would start to hurt, and you start to feel that like gross feeling, you know? Maybe you're feeling that right now as I'm explaining that. And I would just cancel it out. There's no way. There's no way. I don't have that gift. I don't have that gift. I can't do that. And I would just brush it off. But then Doug went on in the conversation, and he began to call out gifts that he saw in me. And he started off by saying, you have a lot of intangibles that you just can't teach people in ministry. He said, number 1, you have to be really, really, really ridiculously good looking. I held it. Last service, I couldn't hold it. It was my Zoolander. I couldn't. He didn't say that, okay? He didn't say that. But he went on to call out these gifts in me. He said, you have a way of connecting with people. You have a way of using humor to break down barriers with people. He said, you have a way of doing this whole systems and processes, which is a big, big thing with churches. He said, I see that in you. And it was this conversation that wrecked my life. I think I've talked about it before, a holy hand grenade moment where somebody takes a holy hand grenade, they pull the pin, they set it under your booty, it explodes, and God totally wrecks you. And that's what happened there. It's because of Doug's encouragement, him affirming and calling out the gifts in me, summoning me, and strengthening me. That word, parakaleoing me. I don't even know if that's an ing, but it's going to work this time. But it was during that car ride that really spearheaded that process. And that's what we need to work on. We need to all work on being an encourager like that. Someone who's willing to see the potential in other people, but also willing to call it out. The story continues in Acts with Barnabas going to the disciples. After he had went out and seen if Paul was legit, seeing if he was the real deal, he came back and he shared with the disciples. And he had to vouch for him. He believed in him. He told them that he's the real deal. Then the next time we see Barnabas, again in Acts chapter 11, great things were happening in Antioch. The message of Jesus was being proclaimed, and the word says a great number who believed turned to the Lord. The church heard about this, and they wanted to send somebody out to go check it out, to go see all the good things that were going on. So again, who do they send? Barnabas. And that takes us to Acts chapter 11, verse 23. When he came and saw the grace of God, he was glad. And he exhorted them to all remain faithful to the Lord with steadfast purpose. For he was a good man, full of the Holy Spirit and of faith. And then it says in Acts 11:25, skipping verse 24, it says, so Barnabas went to Tarsus to look for Saul. And when he had found him, he brought him back to Antioch. Why did he go? Why did he go get Saul? What was the point of that? I looked at the distance between those two places, where he was and to Tarsus, and that was 100 miles. Could you imagine doing that on a razor screw? That's all they had back then, okay? They couldn't, that was cheesy, I'm sorry. But the reason he went and did that, he was willing to travel that far, is because he believed in him. He was bringing him alongside. Again, parakaleo. He was encouraging him. He's bringing him alongside and helping him reach his potential. And if you see what's going on here, Barnabas still isn't really saying anything. He's doing things. It's all doing. So they stayed in Antioch with the church, and the Bible says they taught a great number of people for a year. And as a result, this is when Saul began to flourish, and this is when, I already gave it up earlier, but this is when Saul became Paul. And the two of them went as missionaries traveling from town to town, teaching and encouraging others. And at some point, a man named Mark joined them. And at some point along that road, it got too tough for Mark, and Mark kind of bailed on him. And then we don't really know why, but we do know that in Acts 15, Paul and Barnabas are talking about going out again. And Barnabas says, hey, let's bring Mark along. And Paul says, no, why would we do that? Why would we bring him along? He sissied out on us last time. He bailed. Why would we bring him along? And Barnabas says, no, I want to bring him. And this creates some friction. And so it's at this point when they separate. Paul goes one way, Barnabas and Mark go another. And that brings us to our third thing of our answer of what does it look like to encourage those around us. And that's that encouragers are always willing to give someone a second chance. That's what Barnabas did. And I'm sure Mark felt like a complete failure. Why would anybody believe in me again? And I know that we feel like that a lot. I do. I fail time after time again. We're failing people. We fail our promises to God time and time again. But encouragers know that our God is a God of second chances. He's a God of third chances. He's a God of fourth chances. And because of that, we need to be willing to give people a second chance. And the most amazing thing about the story is it doesn't stop. It just keeps going. Not only did it encourage Mark, but it eventually encouraged Paul too. I'm going to show you guys something cool. This is one of those crazy Bible connections where most of us probably have read this little verse and you kind of skip over it because, Paul's giving instruction to Timothy and he's talking more to Timothy. It doesn't seem relevant to us. But if you look in 2 Timothy 4:11, Paul writing to Timothy, and he's giving him some final instructions. Luke alone is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is very useful to me for ministry. See, at some point, Paul gave Mark a second chance. And it led to them doing ministry together. And if Barnabas didn't give Mark a second chance, none of this probably would have happened. Mark's entire life could have been different, and we wouldn't have the Gospel of Mark as we know it. Paul might still be Saul, and we wouldn't have almost half of the New Testament that Paul went on to write. And it all boils down to this ordinary guy named Barnabas, who was willing to take action. Being an encourager is something that even the most average person can do. He wasn't a big character in the Bible. Most of us maybe heard of Barnabas, but we don't have any clue that he was John. We're all built to encourage. What if we're able to just to take what we have and offer it up to God and allow him to somehow take that and use it to encourage those around us? The question is it worth it? Is it worth it? $129. That person spent $129 to send this little girl to camp. That was all it cost to get all of this encouragement out of it, that it impacted all these lives. It impacted mine. It impacted her dad's. He had to work through this humility and this pride of not wanting to allow someone to pay for his child when he feels like it's his responsibility. $129. And ultimately it leads to this little girl going to camp and having an incredible experience. And what we don't know about encouragement is we don't know what's going to happen after we do it. Do you think Barnabas had any idea that Saul would become Paul? That we would get most of our encouragement from the New Testament from this one guy that he just believed in? The same with Mark. If he wouldn't have given him a second chance. Look at who people can turn out to be if we're willing to encourage. I'm not asking us all to go and sell what we have and sell our cars and our houses and our land and give it away. But what I'm asking is, what can you do? What can you do? And if you're like me, how I was sitting over there, feeling like, no, I can't do it. I'm not good with words. I'm not a leader. I'm not an encouraging type of person. Well, you know who else said that? Moses. He walked upon this burning bush, and it's burning up. It says it's not burning up, but he walks upon it, and God speaks to him through that bush. It says, I want you to go lead the Israelites out of Egypt. He says, I can't do that. Who am I, he said. Who am I? But do you know what God says to him? I am with you. I am with you. And that's the power that we have access to. A God who says he's with us. Let's pray. God, I just ask that you give each of us the courage to encourage. Let this be a message that we can go out this week and apply. Give us the opportunities to encourage. Give us the opportunities to encourage by giving. Give us the opportunities to encourage by seeing value and potential in someone and being willing to call it out. And for those that have someone in their life that they know they need to give a second chance, God, give them the courage. Give them your courage, Jesus, where you forgive us time and time and time again. But just like Moses felt like he had nothing to offer, God, you said, I am with you. God, be with us. Amen. We're going to close a little bit differently today, kind of from our normal way that we close. As you came in, you got a program, and on that program, there's 2 cards. We put 2 there because we know that, if you're husband and wife, usually the wife takes it and the husband's like, no, I'm good, we'll use hers. So there's 2 cards there. So if you don't have one, more than likely if you nudge someone to your right or left, they can pass one to you. We've got ushers who have more that we'd love everybody to take one. Just go ahead and slip up your hand and they can get you one. But we're going to do that as we close today. We're going to take some time right here to write an encouraging note to somebody. And this isn't our be-all, end-all of this message. This is just a little thing that we can do to write a message to somebody and encourage them. There's going to be some music playing, and just as you get your card, go ahead and start writing a note to somebody. And I don't know who it is for you. Maybe it's your son, or it's a daughter, it's a friend, a coworker, a husband, a wife, whoever it is. God's going to lead you. And it doesn't have to say anything perfect, but think through someone that you could encourage. Maybe you need to give somebody something. Maybe you need to take it home and slip a gift card in it or some money. Please address that to Brandon Morse. 16. No. But maybe you need to see value and potential and call that out in somebody. Say, I appreciate you. I appreciate this about you. Maybe you need to give someone a second chance. Write them a little note. We're going to take a few minutes right now to do that. And if you're watching online or listening to the podcast, I encourage you this week to take the challenge. Take a card and write it to someone. Go ahead and take a few minutes and do that right now.